2. The Superhuman Crew. Carp crosses the river, headlights making pools on the steel bridge which had replaced the Brooklyn Bridge, blown apart during the last battle, its moldy towers still looming in the East River, leading through the wall into the castle complex, a massive medieval affair with battlements, built on towers, rising from the riverbanks of Manhattan Island, on concrete foundations 8 stories high, guarded 24/7 by a tireless army of robots. Construction had been started the day following the capitulation of the last rebels. Azure, Archer, and a militia holding out in Washington. However, despite the ceaseless efforts of workers, both human and robotic, for the past 15 years, Castle Corman was, regardless of its staggering area having already swallowed Manhattan Island, barely a quarter finished, with its newest area in Upper Manhattan little more than a barren wasteland of foundations. Carp purses his mouth distastefully at the structure, which had replaced the familiar skyline. Corman also could have gone anywhere. Instead, he had founded the headquarters of the New Order in the city where his rival, Atlas Man, had fallen, blanketing Manhattan Island with the fortress and renaming the city Cormanopolis. Carp slows as he passes the 20-foot security robots flanking the gates, programmed to recognize those with clearance. Carp flashes his famous smile while shivering at the thought of their systems malfunctioning and turns into the parking lot where he always parked correctly. A scattering of stout trees add a splash of color to the drab grays of metal and concrete. Carp approaches the elevator in the wall. Carp pauses at the door to the meeting hall, grumbles about robotic guards, and smooths his clothes before pushing it open. The large room is windowless, utterly unassailable from outside interference, dominated by a long black table, the holographic image of every top member of the Order crowded around it, faces stern. Alexander Corman sits at the head of the table on a metal throne. Dr. Dread in his white armor and black shroud, his mask staring across the table. Although, like Carp, the man inside the suit possesses no superhuman powers, his intelligence might be justifiably considered superhuman in its vastness. His utilization of this one faculty having brought forth fleets of creations of unparalleled power and complexity, his armor being the greatest of them. With it, he had personally defeated Atlas Man and maintained control over his fellow conquerors who would gladly overthrow him if given the chance. As it was, one disapproving glance through Corman's death mask silenced any opposition. Corman inclines his head slightly as Carp noisily opens the great door and saunters to a chair, nodding to the other members. Carp had not seen most of them in over a decade, and it was still too soon for a reunion. Truth be told, he thinks, they're a terrifying coalition of superhumans, gods, and monsters, and to say that sharing a room with any of them puts my heart in my throat is a vast understatement. It's more like walking on a razor blade over lava while playing chicken with a cave full of cruel grizzly bears. One glimmer of a crack in my disinterested mask of a face, a half note of doubt in a glib remark, or a hint of ambition, and zap! I'm going to be ripped limb from limb and eaten alive. Or worse. Well, Lowe says, a hook-nosed god who had betrayed his own brother during the war. Now that the clown has joined us at last, may we begin? Carp feigns distress. That's harsh. Besides, Helmet Head isn't here either. Or wasn't he invited? He simply knew you'd be late. The voice had come from the shadowy figure of Ian Krebs, Metaman, who hovers in from an adjoining chamber. A thick blue helmet covers his head, and a blue mantle hangs from his shoulders. Ian was well over 70, but his powers of polarity, electricity, and minor telepathy had earned him second place in Corman's hierarchy and prevented anyone from usurping his position. Carp was the only one who dared make little jokes at his expense, and just on rare occasions. Another night of carousing, clown? Before Carp can answer, Ian steps aside. I think this belongs to you. I found her wandering rather aimlessly by the front gate. Carp had told Maddie to never go anywhere without first asking his permission. The sight of her makes him smolder. I'm sorry, Maddie sobs, hands clasped and shaking. But the dog kept calling us at home, and I got worried, so. Her sentence trails into incoherence under Carp's glare. Go and sit somewhere, Carp says, pointing towards the corner. Somewhere out of the way. Maddie scurries as directed and squats on the ground, clasping her knees. Whatever happened to my fiery doll? Carp thinks as he sinks into a seat, sullen and pouting. Disgusting, mutters a tall woman in spandex, her red costume rendered in blue by the hologram. Julia, the Fire Ruby. A fit, youthful woman supposed to be almost 50 without a streak of gray marring her black hair. I should fly down there and take her away from you. Now, Carp waves a limp wrist at her. Don't forget the rules. I didn't fight so women could be oppressed. You can take those rules and shove them up your... Enough! Corman booms from behind his mask. Fire Ruby folds her arms, and Ian takes his place. Corman leans back, but still looms over the room. Must I remind you all again that if we quarrel, our alliance will shatter, just as such alliances were shattered in the old days? A moment of silence. There is a pressing matter before us which requires our focus. Well, Carp says, with his composure apparently regained. I'm all ears. As most of you know, but may have forgotten, Corman begins, my surveillance systems monitor the whole world to keep things running in a smooth, orderly fashion according to my vision for society. Carp had grown accustomed to Corman's self-absorbed tendencies, but most of the others roll their eyes or fold their arms during this first part of his discourse. Fortunately for those with short tempers who might have resorted to challenging Corman rather than continue to listen, he comes to the point. 3 hours ago, one of my sensors detected an object traveling at approximately 300,000 kilometers per second. A few scientifically savvy members are impressed, but also troubled, and a few shift in their seats. However, the significance of the figure is lost on Carp. The speed of light, gentlemen, Corman explains, and turns to a hulking mass of scales, horns, and gnarly muscles. Its trail went cold in Kansas. That's your territory, Behemoth. Can you shed any light on this? No, I ain't seen nothing flying round, Behemoth says, curling his lip. 4 of us have light speed capacity, Ian says, floating 2 ball bearings above his palm, as was his habit, well, Mr. Malevolent. Fire Ruby and Dark Seth shoot stares of hate at Ian for his insinuation. Corman remains calm. I know what you're thinking, and you're wrong. My machinery is programmed to recognize all of us, and it is foolproof. I, of course, can achieve light speed as well. However, as the one calling the meeting, I am above suspicion. The question is obvious, Gray Skull says, arms folded, his bony face somehow managing a thoughtful frown. Was it Atlas Man? Is he back from the dead? Carp frowns, remembering how often the heroes had come back from the dead in the old days. He also remembered the time Atlas Man had plucked him off the street by his collar and lectured him about his life choices 100 feet off the ground. Corman shakes his head. No. As a precaution, my machines at the pit performed a thorough search. Atlas Man's bones are still with the rest of the heroes. Do you know who it is or not? Mr. Malevolent asks. A bald albino in black tatters with eyes literally shooting fire and a mouth of needles. If I knew, why would you be here? The room shifts in another spasm of annoyance. What I need you to do is deploy in pairs and find this stranger. I have already made team assignments according to affinities, compatibility, and power levels. Each of you has received course projections of where this thing might be to your phones based on average walking speeds and. Hold, Lowe interrupts. 'Tis not present on your sensors anymore. I thought your system was perfection. And do you not have robots for this sort of game? My equipment scans for conspicuous activity. At present, this thing is behaving inconspicuously. It can't have gone very far, and I expect you to find it. We must consider the real possibility of a new superhuman. It could be a random accident, such as the countless ones which made most of us and them, or the offspring of one of our enemies. Either way, we cannot ignore the development. Now, our quarry may be hiding in the blight, or he could conceal himself in a field or farm, so we must be thorough. After a while, the meeting ends. Ian floats away and the holograms flicker out. Fire Ruby shoots a parting glance at Carp, who pretends not to notice. But as he stands to leave, Corman suddenly says, Never make it hard for me to find you. An honest mistake, Carp says, utterly calm. Corman's penetrating scowl is a warning. Anyone can be replaced, especially an aging crook with no powers. He sweeps out of the room, cape fluttering. Carp tosses his head and crooks his finger at Maddie in the corner. I'm so sorry, boss. Maddie whines as she comes sheepishly towards him. Carp strikes a whimsical pose. There was a time when you would have slugged Helmet Head for the way he talked to me. Boss, Shut up. Let's go. They ride the elevator in silence to the parking lot, dawn streaking the sky over the wall. Carp forgets all about Maddie when faced with the empty parking spot where he had left his car and thrusts his fist to his hips. No one, but no one, would ever think of touching my car. Maddie, too afraid to speak, tugs his sleeve and points up. Carp follows her finger and settles into apathy beyond anger. Helmet Head. Perhaps for the sake of a perverse joke, the sports car is nestled 15 feet off the ground in the branches of a tree, and he had left his phone on the passenger seat, which now contained important information from Corman. He turns to Maddie with a soothing grin. My dear, would you mind doing me a favor?